apparently, a statement has come out, and it is freaking people out. We definitely need to talk about that. People are talking about JK's effect on the stock of the label. And then we have JK at the Super Bowl being talked about again. So I've mentioned this many times before, the community likes to bring up things from the past, and they'll bring it up every year, whether they are just reminded of it or they just feel like bringing up this memory. A lot of times, events get brought up again, or old controversies get brought up again just because someone who is a part of a fan club just wakes up one morning in a bad mood and remembers all of the things that pissed them off and then decides to go on a tirade online, and it becomes a trending topic. Of course, to some degree, some of the backlash or the controversy that gets brought up again makes some sense, and I can totally understand why they would be upset. But other times, while I can understand, it still seems like it is too much. That the reaction is too much for what the controversy actually was. One of the old controversies that was a big deal was the fact that apparently the label told JK to go ahead and enlist and remove the opportunity for him to perform at the Super Bowl. This wasn't an offer where he would be formally performing, and it would just be him on stage, but he would be performing alongside Usher, and I believe Usher had confirmed that he did ask, but the label said no because JK needed to enlist. Now keep in mind when JK enlisted, it was, I believe, months before he was asked. Because I highly doubt if the performance was like the next day or within the next week that the label or the government couldn't have pushed that back or JK couldn't have pushed it back. And performed first and then went to the military. However, this controversy, when it gets brought up again, I don't think is ever looked at from a more sensible perspective. The label mentioned that JK could not perform because he had to go enlist in the military, was not wrong or was not anything bad. People often think that the label was pressuring JK to enlist very soon or enlist much sooner than he needed to be because he was not at the age limit in which he had to enlist right away. He could have still waited a little bit. But people felt like he was being pushed to enlist because the label wanted to get the BTS reunion back as soon as possible. Here's the thing that people don't realize, the label saying JK cannot perform because he has to go to the military was likely just the label mentioning what was the truth, not them restricting him from performing. The label does not have the power to say when someone can go to the military and when someone cannot. And what we actually have no idea of is when JK decided to file to enlist. JK could have thought that he wasn't going to get asked to perform at the Super Bowl because most people don't just think that they are going to get asked, and he just decided to go ahead and put in his enlistment papers. And if you don't know how the enlistment process works, basically, the person who has to enlist has to register. And then, once they are on that list and they are on the registration, they just have to wait for the government to call them to start their enlistment. And it's usually not immediately. Sometimes it can take from weeks to potentially even months before the military will call them. And then I think the idol has some extensions that they can use. I believe I remember reading it was like 3 or 5 or something. However, JK didn't use any of those extensions, and he likely did find out that he was offered this performance at the Super Bowl. Why didn't he use any of those extensions? That likely was his choice. Now something that people don't realize is that the idea of fame and notoriety isn't the most important thing for an artist's career. Because what? At the end of the day, would you consider to be one of the more important things for an idol? Probably exposure and probably money. Those are the things that are going to keep the artist going. Now, of course, the Super Bowl does provide a ton of exposure. It's not the only way in which JK would be seen by that amount of people. The World Cup is viewed by almost 2 billion people, while the Super Bowl is viewed by maybe 150 million people. While definitely a huge stage, the Super Bowl is nowhere near compared to the amount of exposure that JK got during the World Cup, and so in comparison, JK could probably also think this is not a big deal, I don't need to do this. Now switching gears a little bit, this was very interesting. There was an investment company or some sort of financial company I think that talked about the stock concerning the label. I want to start off by saying I don't know how true this is because I couldn't find the official source stating this, and everything kind of leads back to just this tweet that is talking about it. So I'm just going to be referring to the tweet and to that and what people are saying rather than saying it as a fact. My opinion is that JK's decision to enlist was his own choice, and there should be no pressure involved. Many people think that his skipping the Super Bowl performance was a big loss, but in reality, it is proof of his dedication and responsibility. Despite being a global superstar, he is prioritizing his national duty, which is not only a sign of being a good artist but also a good person. JK may not have done the Super Bowl, but the respect and admiration he gained from his decision-making are far greater than any stage performance. We should all respect this and support JK because whatever he does what's best for his fans.